Michael, how you doing? Can you hear me?
I am wonderful. How is Steve doing on a Monday?
Oh, great, man. It's lovely here in Cleveland, Ohio. How's Raleigh treating you?
The weather could not be better. I'll say the only complaint I have today is that last night I went to bed and the Buffalo Bills were mathematically it was going to be impossible for them to win the game, and I wake up this morning and they won the game.
You actually went to sleep when they were down by 16 or whatever number it was. I stayed
Yeah.
up and I had some fantasy football players that I was paying attention to, and it did not help me. So, um, hey, Michael, you can hear me, you can see me. Thank you very much for doing this. I want to thank the participants that are on this call and their participation. Before we begin, just keep in mind everyone's going to be muted for this call. That being said, you have the ability to chat questions. So at any point you want to ask a question, we'll put it in the chat, and I'll make sure that it gets answered by Michael or myself. If we don't get to your questions, or if you think of something at a later time and date, just let me know, and I'll interact with Michael if I have to. Let's begin. Michael, thank you so much. Michael Johnson is the franchisee of the SpeedPro Northwest Raleigh studio. And I'm really excited to introduce Michael because I worked with him a little over a year ago. And here we are doing one of these interview calls. And Michael, I think you sat in on some of these when you were making your decision. And it's really cool to see this full circle. And so I want to introduce you, Michael. I want you to introduce yourself. And if you could go right into what your previous work history was, really your previous history, right, before SpeedPro. And then we'll pick it up right from that point. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I would say right out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps. I spent 5 years deploying to twice to Iraq, once to Katrina. Learned a lot of good leadership skills there. Saw the world through different eyes, and but after my time in the Marine Corps was up, I knew I worked in restaurants in high school, so I went into restaurants, just bartending, waiting tables, trying to make a buck where I could. And but in those years of waiting tables, I really honed my customer service skills. I was dating this wonderful girl who's now my wife, and her dad owned a fabrication shop. So I started working some summers there, and actually worked my way up all the way to be the operations manager. So got familiar with job shops, got familiar with manufacturing processes, and worked there for several years, and didn't end up working out in the long run. I left there, went to a crane and rigging place, also worked my way up to the operations manager there, just organizing people, putting people where they need to be, seeing the problems and solving them. But very few and far between did I actually get in and get really my hands dirty. Usually it was a matter of putting people into the right places because they were larger organizations. COVID hit. I was doing some writing. I decided that I had just moved to an outside sales role at the crane and rigging outfit. And outside sales wasn't the best job during COVID, so I ended up leaving and doing some financial writing during the pandemic. Had a baby during the pandemic, so it was really great being able to be home for a lot of that and being, first steps, first words, all that great stuff. Everly just started kindergarten this last week here, so obviously it was a few years ago. As we were ending COVID, I went back into the workforce and ended up at a steel place. I was selling steel. I was at a sales desk selling steel, and I knew I wanted to get back out working for myself, and so I launched a search to find a business to buy. Happened to stumble across SpeedPro. I had never been in a print shop before in my life. I didn't even know what wide format printing was, and I didn't know really the first thing about signs or printing, but happened to find a SpeedPro for sale, learned what SpeedPro was, talked to some of the people in the industry, talked to people I knew that were in the sign and wide format printing world that I had met over the years, and just ended up getting really interested in it. So that led me up to talking to Steve. A year ago. I want to say we talked in May 2024 is our first interaction.
And so that was great, Michael. And what I want to talk about, because I remember when I first started talking to you, you know, you had all these different things that you were looking at and, possibilities, opportunities. So what was it about this opportunity that made you feel like, all right, Speed Pro is the right choice for Michael Johnson and my family? And by the way, congratulations on the kindergarten. My
Thank you.
we're in what is it? We're in eighth grade, sixth grade, and third grade now. So very, very exciting times. But I remember the kindergarten, getting on the bus and off the bus. It was very cute. Um, but yeah, talk to us a little bit about when you realized that Speed Pro was the right fit or the right opportunity for you and your family.
So I think it was just the fact that it really checked a lot of the boxes that I was looking for. One of the things was B2B. I really did not want to be in a B2C business, just had absolutely no interest in it. The other thing was the recurring customers. Relationships, like when I was on the sales desk at that steel place, I kind of had my regular customers that we were selling to regularly. And, within 8 months to a year, I really had a good handle on what these people needed. And, because each customer is going to be a little bit different, right? One's going to come and beat me up on price. The other one's going to beat me up on lead time. The other ones just want to complain about something for 10 minutes and then they give you the order. And so it was just, feeling these things out, but building these relationships over time. And then just seeing that this, SpeedPro was primarily focused on, yes, it was, it wasn't necessarily recurring revenue, but it was recurring customers. So that was really, really attractive to me as well. The fact that it was dealing with machinery, it was basically manufacturing. Like, yes, we're not welding and shearing and cutting in the same way, but the processes were fairly similar. We bring material in, we keep track of how much we're using on a job, we buy more material when we need it, and so just a lot of that made good sense to me. And so I went down the path of going, okay, well, let me see if I can. And this was the first transaction I attempted. When you try to buy a business, I've heard that some deals can fall apart. So this was the first one I attempted, and even though we had a few speed bumps we had to work our way through, like any deal, we ended up being able to transact. So, but the whole time it just seemed like a good system. The other owners that I met in the process were really good people, and it just seemed like a good network where I would be able to get in there and actually be able to make a difference. So yeah, I guess if that essentially answers the question. Like I said, just checked a lot of boxes for me, and so far so good, right? Like we were able to transact. We've actually been able to grow the business since I've gotten in here, and I think we're set up for a really prosperous decade.
Michael, I want to go back a little bit just because I feel like the common theme, everybody I talk to, right, most of them are not familiar with the large and wide format graphic industry, right? And
Correct.
what you said, right, was basically what I hear all the time, right? People like the Monday through Friday 9 to 5. They like the low staffing. They like the B2B. But with all that being said, are all of those realistic? Okay, and that's because that's what everybody says they like. But then I feel like, well, is that real, right? And so go ahead and answer that. And again, this is everybody that's on this call. Most likely, you're not from the industry, but this is somebody that's been in this business for a little over a year now. So go ahead, Michael.
So I wouldn't quite say it's 9 to 5. I mean, there's definitely a lot of hustle needed. I am typically up most weekdays. I'm up about 5 in the morning, getting my day organized. So I try to spend about an hour and a half with a quiet house where I can work before the 5-year-old's up and before the dogs are barking or anything else like that. I definitely put in some time in the evenings too. But I do still have the weekends. Like I've drawn a hard line in the sand that Saturday is not for work, and I've been able to keep that for a year. I'm not saying I won't text a customer if they text me, but like I really have not had to go and dive into hours long conversations or anything on the weekend. So I would say yes, for the most part you do. I wouldn't say it's strictly 9 to 5, especially here in my first year. I knew that there was gonna be a lot of because there's a lot of learning curve, right? There was just a lot of things that I knew I was gonna just gonna have to learn on the fly and figure out as I went. And so there's some nights and weekends figuring those things out. But it's all, it's definitely everything here is learnable. And I think that's the good thing is, if you can put a year in, you're going to have such a good grasp on these things on the other side. And you know, and you don't have to know everything in the up and you know setting off anyways. If you're good with customers, like I feel I am very good with customers, I can I don't have to know anything about what I'm selling them when I go out to meet them. I can show up, shake their hand, talk about their business a little bit, take some notes, take some measurements, and then bring it back to the studio, and then start to figure out how we're going to solve their problem.
Michael, that was I want to go back to that. So you mentioned that you don't really know or need to have a full grasp on what you're doing. You need to understand a little bit about their business, right? And that's because again, I always tell that to people. People, when you're buying a car, not many people are asking about what's the science behind. I turn my wheel and I don't feel the 5 or 6 thousand pounds that I'm trying to turn, right? Nobody's
Yeah.
trying to get into the science of that. And so, how did you feel comfortable in selling SpeedPro, and how long was that learning curve? Before you felt comfortable, hey, I can just say yes to this job, and I'll just bring it back to my team, or go to SpeedPro and ask, how do I do this?
I mean, it was literally the first week. I got a call from a restaurant. They're actually nearby. They're right across the street from the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes had actually bought this restaurant, and they were rebranding. They were just rebranding the whole thing, and they had 5 or 6 trucks that they used for catering events, and they wanted them all wrapped. And I had yet to sell a wrap, I could kind of hear the panic in the girl's voice as she called. This is just like she's dealing with so much stuff. So I just went out there. I go, tell you what, I go, you're on site now. Let me come out and see you. So I drove out there, and she was just telling me everything she had on her plate. And I didn't have to talk about anything about a cast or a calendared wrap or anything like that, or how great our inks were or curing time. None of that. I said, look, Sarah, I can tell you're pretty overwhelmed with everything you've got going on in this rebrand. Let me just deal with the wraps for you, okay? And this will just be one thing taken off your plate. She says, thank you so much. Just, yeah, send me a quote and we'll work it out. I sent her a quote. I remember her boss beat me up for, $1,000 on a 5 vehicle wrap, so it wasn't the end of the world. I pretty much gave him the $1,000 discount, and we were doing business with them. So we ended up doing 7 trucks for them, where I think we had started off at 5 and they added 2 more in. But it was just that showing up, right? They're in crisis. They needed this thing done. They didn't know how to do it. I showed up and said, hey, I'm just going to take this off your plate for you. And that's all she needed to hear. She did not care one way or the other about how I was going to do it. She didn't care about premium quality or anything like that. Obviously, she wanted it to be good, but she doesn't know the difference between Avery and 3M, and she never asked.
Right. Okay. So I want to put you back in your shoes when you were looking at buying this, right? So
Sure.
now that you're in year in, right? What was your first year of ownership compared to what you expected it to be? Does that make sense? Like, so
It does. I don't know if I had a great expectation, Steve. Like I remember going into the transaction and just feeling completely blind as to what was going to be on the other side of it. Like I knew it was going to be a good interaction because I was going to put good energy into the world and get good energy back, but I had very little expectations because I just had no idea what I was getting into, if that makes sense.
it does, and so I want to take that a little bit further. Then, so when we first talked, I remember you went through the discovery day, and one of the questions I believe they asked is, do you think your network could potentially become business? Okay, your sphere of influence, your network, and I, has that amounted to anything? Because I know that's a lot of people in their minds are like, yeah, well, I know this guy or this gal, and they own this business, they work for this business. Has your previous relationships, have they become work for you? And if so, how did you go about introducing, maybe reintroducing yourself, or just introducing the idea that, hey, now I own a Speed Pro in Raleigh?
So yeah, I mean, for me, it was a numbers game. Like I came from sales, I understand sales, and it's a numbers game. I like my previous employers. I went and visited them just to let them know, hey, this is what I'm doing now. I haven't gotten any business from any of them, but I've made connections, and people I've gotten referrals from, even in my time searching for a business, I met people along the way, and I have now been wrapping some of their trucks because these other owners out there, they've discovered that they've bought, like, one guy bought a towing business, and we connected about just buying businesses, and then he's like, well, the old owners were using these guys down the road, and he goes, I just hate them. Can you wrap the vehicles for the same price? And I was like, yeah, let me just price it. Don't tell me what they're pricing. Let me just price it and see if we're in the neighborhood. And we ended up being a little bit less than my competitor, which was great for the customer. I wish I had asked for that price up front, but no, it was like a profitable project. But we managed to get I managed to make connections very easily. And then once you satisfy that first customer, he's actually referred me to other towing companies in the area, and it's been so. Yes, the network definitely has helped, and some of it's just my knowledge, right? I came from crane and rigging. The company I used to work for, I did go and visit them. I have not been able to get any business from them. But there was a competitor in the area, and I knew them. They always, I don't want to say too much about too many things, but they didn't usually have the nicest equipment. And so we usually knew to steer clear of them. And then all of a sudden I saw new cranes rolling down the highway. And I was like, oh, wow, something changed there. So I actually went to that crane company and said, hey, I noticed you guys are investing, and if you're looking for graphics to be done. They said, no, don't worry about it. We've got a guy. It's all set. And I said, well, put my car in the trash if you don't need me. 3 weeks later, they called me up. Man, that guy stood me up again. We just can't afford this, because you got to understand the customer once again. When they take a crane off the road for the day, they're giving up $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 worth of revenue. Is it really worth trying to save $500 on the wrap if the guy isn't going to show up, and then you have to give him a second day and lose a second day of revenue? So yes, definitely understanding my network, understanding my customers has definitely translated into revenue revenue and profits hitting the bottom line here.
And so talk a little bit about, your year in. What has been the biggest obstacle that that you had to overcome? And let's, look, buying a business, building a business, there's always bumps along the way. But once you took over as you're the owner, Michael Johnson, what's been the biggest obstacle that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
I think the biggest thing for me was probably just getting everybody on the same page. When you buy a business, it's definitely interesting because there's always like kind of split loyalties where people were so, they were stuck in the ways that they were doing it. And so it's definitely tough to get everybody working together and marching to the beat of the same drum, which was the drum I was going to play, which is going to be different than the previous owners. And there was just no way, I kept as much as I could in place, but then there was just certain things that just weren't going to work. It wasn't my personality to. So definitely getting everybody marching to the beat of the same drum, I think, has been the biggest challenge. I tackled that in a few ways. One, I did make some personnel changes. That was very, very difficult to do, but it's the Band-Aid you rip off. Once you do it, you're always like, oh, should have done that 3 months ago, So I did have to change some personnel, but I found I had the right people in place at that point. And then it was just a lot of it was just communication, making sure that when something wasn't done to my standards or the way I wanted it done, I had to go and correct it. And, that takes putting on the big boy pants and showing up and saying this is the way it's going to be done, and and also putting it out there when something's not being done correctly, you have to put your foot down, and and if you have to make a personnel change, it's very difficult to do, but you can survive those things. And that was where, even when we were making that personnel change, I go, we have this incredible network that has been just so good. And that's the one, I don't know how much we're going to talk about that, but I'll say, and this is from every owner I've talked to, the network of owners, the support we have for each other is probably the biggest asset this franchise offers. And going into that, where we were going to lose a lot of industry knowledge. But when we decided to do that, we go, no, we can lean on this network. We can lean on the franchise. And I know people are going to jump to and help us out if we get into a jam. So as difficult as those weeks were, we've come through it. And I think, and with very, very minimal impact to the business. And, and once again, the support network has just been there. Anytime we've had an issue, somebody's been there to kind of back me up. And sometimes it's just like, just, because there was some long nights there and long days, long nights where I didn't get as much sleep as I needed to. But even then, I had a really stupid question that I couldn't figure out on my own. And as soon as somebody said it to me, I was like, oh yeah, obviously. But there was somebody willing to get on the phone with me and explain something simple, stupid to me. Another owner that wanted to see me succeed.
Yeah, and people talk about the the support of the network all the time, and so talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, you're in Raleigh. There's one brand new studio that's south of you. You've got and two studios that have been in business for well over 10 years. How's the support been just from the network throughout SpeedPro? Because again, I think people really do rely on the interaction and support that from the owners.
Yeah, I would say I've actually probably gotten more support from outside my immediate zip code than inside. Nothing wrong with anybody in here, but like or in Wake County where I'm at, but the people that I guess are the fastest to respond on the Ask the Owners thread. Like a lot of times, I get a call from Georgia, I get a call from Arizona, and so it's just been there's always somebody there wanting to help you out. Though I think trying to remember, there was like one thing. I think it was a complaint with AT&T where I couldn't get my phone changed over. I was like, anyone know how to fix AT&T? And that was the one time it was crickets. But anytime it's been something to do with production or just talking to a customer about something. I think just last week I got inquiries for boat wraps, 2 on the same day, and I was like, okay, I haven't done a boat wrap. Let me just send this out to the owners. And I mean, I probably got 10 responses within 24 hours. And then I got people saying, hey, can you share what you've learned? So we got a really good, thread about just how to wrap boats, the little things to watch out for. And that knowledge, circulated instantly, within a day. Everybody had that knowledge. And we kind of had a 1-page email put together with just the key points that you need to look at when you're going to wrap a boat.
Michael, talk to us a little bit about I want to go through your studio, okay? And
Sure.
and maybe I'll start here. How big is your studio? If I remember, it was around 3,000 square feet, or was it a little bit bigger?
So yeah, so Jerry and Kim's was about 3,000 square feet. So when we started, we just had the suite on the left. We have since added the suite on the right. So we did pick up a second suite. So we're closer to 6,000 square feet now.
Wow. Okay. And so talk to us a little bit about your equipment. And I'm going to go through these, and
Sure.
so you could talk about your cutter, your plotter, but just as you go, just stop, and then I want to just mention here's what a brand new studio will start out with. But if you don't mind, then talk about why they would need the cutter on the right, for example. So go ahead.
Yeah,
Just
so
talk to us a little bit about the equipment.
Sure. The Suma cutter there, that thing basically, it's a CNC cutter. If you're familiar with a Cricut, you know what the crafting Cricut is? This is just a giant Cricut. And so we use that. It can cut and it can route, which means basically we can do substrates as like plastics, PVCs, and actually route out individual letters to make 3D letters. And we also use it to to cut out decals for the wraps and whatnot too. I think right now I've got a project of like 200 some odd posters getting cut out on that right now. And then as soon as that's done, there's 3 vehicle wraps that'll get set up on it next, and then they'll be cutting the vehicle wraps the rest of the day for install tomorrow. So it's a great machine. It really is. I'm actually putting in a second one because I don't like having that single point of failure. It's not going to be the same one. It's going to be a little bit of a different model, but it's going to be a routing table that can also cut. But it's just such a great machine, but it can also become a little bit of a bottleneck. But if you're wanting to do anything in like 3D lettering or just cutting out any sort of boards, these routing tables are just fantastic. You got to have them, and they're pretty simple to use too. Once you figure it out, like it's not rocket science. Like I figured it out when I had to, and I came in. I intentionally did not run any equipment for several months just to try to get my hands around the business and really understand the customers more than anything. And then when I've had to jump in and learn something, it's a YouTube video in 10 minutes, or you call it, I've also developed relationships with all the techs in the area, and they'll all get on the horn with me when I need to. So yeah, I know I feel like I'm rambling, but does that make sense?
You're doing great. Yeah, it's interesting too, because what Michael's referring to is this large piece of equipment on the right, and the shelf life of a flatbed cutter, it can last for a very long time. And typically studios, they get one and it outlives the owner. Um, I see on the left-hand side, I'm assuming that's a Suma plotter, and you've got a piece of vinyl that's been loaded in. What is the job? Because just keep in mind, everybody on this call, you start out with the plotter. The flatbed cutter on the right is something that you would eventually, purchase, lease, finance at some point. But it really did your market and where your sales are kind of dictates when you buy it. But talk to us a little bit about the plotter and what role it serves within your studio.
Yeah, so so that's actually a Graph Tech. It's an older
Right.
Graph Tech, Steve. But yeah, it does the same thing as a Suma. That one, it basically just kiss cuts though, so it won't do any through cuts, which means if you're anything that's getting cut, weeded, and taped, we can run on this. And it's just nice to have a second machine that can run that equipment. The Suma, the big table there, can do all of that, but it's a bottleneck too. So it's nice to have when okay, I've just got a few letters that have to get done. We can put this over on the Graph Tech and have it do that, and have the Graph Tech cut this job. Where you might have a job that can't be cut on the Graph Tech, then we put that one on the Suma.
So
Keep going.
keep going, Michael. Yep.
I was just saying, but they do similar things, but the table is definitely capable of doing a lot more. And then we're actually the new machine that we're adding. I have it. It just hasn't been installed yet. It's a Cutworks routing table, and so where the Suma is a cutting table that can route, the Cutworks machine is a routing table that can cut. And so at that point, we're going to have some really good redundancies. We don't have that single point of failure because the Suma and the Cutworks table will be able to completely back each other up, and that means that we're just never, theoretically, knock on wood, we should never be completely unable to cut. Where a couple of months ago, I did have a situation where we had like a circuit board go down on that, and a lot of projects started to pile up. And that was one of those late nights, early mornings for me, getting on the phone with the tech, getting in here at 7 in the morning, working through everything, spending a couple hours with him, and then that way come 9:30, 10 o'clock when when our techs came in to actually run the machines, I was able to get them up and running, and then walk away from it and let the projects get made. But I just, coming from a manufacturing background, it's always a little bit stressful when you have a single point of failure.
And talk to us a little bit about this. I want to go back to the one slide, but talk to us about, so these are your roll-to-roll printers. Talk to us a little bit about this. And so again, for folks on the call or in the future, you start out with a roll-to-roll printer, a plotter that we just talked about, and then a laminator. But talk to us a little bit about the roll-to-roll printers that you have right now.
Sure. So the Epson is the blue one right there, center. That one is actually a printer I purchased after the transaction. We had another one, and this is called an eco-solvent printer, and it actually puts ink down that creates a chemical bond with the vinyl. And so this is our primary. We really use it for almost everything because it's just such a nice printer. It works so well. But it creates that chemical bond with the vinyl or whatever we happen to be printing on, and that for like your vehicle wraps, when the installers are stretching it, it helps it not lose color when it's during that stretching process. But like I said, it can print banners. It printed all those 200 some odd posters we were doing. It printed all of those. To the left of it, we have our HP printer. That one's a little older. It's HP 700, I believe. It's a little more finicky, it works generally once you get it going, but it does take a little bit of patience to really get it running. But it's still a great printer, prints most of our banners, things that don't necessarily need that chemical bond that the eco solvents create. A banner is just going to sit there in the wind anyway, so it's not really going to get stretched. So that you can just put ink on top of vinyl or ink on top of banner material, and you're fine. So it's nice to have both of them, but we could probably get away with just the Epson if we really wanted to. But once again, for me, I like to have some redundancy. And then one other thing I have here, I don't know if because you haven't seen this studio since I've got it all set up, Steve, but I put those computer monitors up, or giant TVs, and that's our what's due today board, and what's coming up in the next couple of days. And we have that same computer screen on both on both sides of the studio now. And as projects are running behind, they turn red. If they're due today or due in the past, they're red. If they're due today or going to be due in the next 24 hours, they're orange. And then the day after that'll be yellow. So that's a really great resource. And that's actually part of Corebridge. It's such a report that we pulled from Corebridge and put it on a computer, and it just keeps everyone one of those things where it keeps us all marching to the beat of the same drum. Like, it's very clear what the expectations are to what we need to get done today, because everyone can just look at that board.
Yeah, and I really love how everybody's working in and out of Corebridge. I love this setup. And that was going to be my next question, Michael, is talk to us a little bit about how your setup is here. And what I assume how you guys are working on this is everybody has, like, you have a wireless remote or a wireless mouse and keyboard, and you could be working on this from wherever you are within the production area. Is that correct?
Well, not quite. There's actually a shelf right below that TV, and there's a keyboard and mouse right there. So that's kind of my headquarters. When I go out, I don't necessarily have a formal production meeting anymore. It just became too time consuming, and not everybody needed to know about every project. Like, because we have multiple people putting orders in, we had multiple people doing file setup. So I tend to go in over to that computer first thing in the morning, and then towards the end of the day, and kind of just shout out a little bit. Hey, where are we at on this? Hey, have we gotten approval on this? Is this printing? Do we have a hold of? Do we have enough material? And we just kind of go through it, and everyone's still working, but we're answering questions at the same time. And so that's kind of my central headquarters, and then I have my office off to the side where I sometimes take these phone calls.
All right, talk to us about this big printer that you have. Is this an HP?
That's a 1000. Yep, HP 1000. That's a flatbed printer. That thing is awesome. Anytime I can put an order or a job on that machine, it just gets it done so quickly. The print quality is fantastic. The maintenance on it, it's like that computer screen that you kind of see hanging off of it. I mean, it shows you little videos of how to do every little maintenance thing. It's like it really requires very little expertise as long as you can follow a pictograph, how-to diagram. But that one, yard signs, we do a lot of, a lot of yard signs, a lot of, like, if we're doing 3D letters and they need to be a particular color, we print them on this first, and then we route them out afterwards. So yeah, it's just a workhorse, but it's also like one of those things that if you don't have a flatbed printer, your only way to make some of those signs is to then cut the vinyl and then tape it, weed it, tape it, and transfer it over. And that's a very time-consuming process. Where that flatbed, it just knocks things out so quickly, and a lot of projects that we put through the shop only touch that flatbed. And anytime you can have a single process for production, I look at that as just almost as good as gold, because you think about a vehicle wrap, and your vehicle wrap, you have to print it, laminate it, cut it, weed it, tape it, and install it. And at any point in that process, if something goes wrong, you have to start back at step one, where if you only have one step in the process, the chances for something messing up are pretty slim. So as much as I can keep that printer busy, I do. I think we're running 40 menu boards through it today and tomorrow. Hopefully we get them done today, but we have the cushion to do them tomorrow. And those are double-sided. They're not one station though. They are getting laminated and grommeted. So we do have potential for error there, but should be a really nice order.
All right, and so talk to us a little bit about, so again, going back, studio start out with a plotter, roll-to-roll printer, and here I see the columnistral laminator. Talk to us about what's the role of a laminator. Obviously, it laminates, but what other items do you put through a laminator?
I mean, we put all of the. We actually have two of these machines. The Kala, I forget even what the other one is. But we run like those menu boards, so we're printing those on Ultra board, laminating them afterwards, and we're laminating both sides, and so those actually run through the laminator. The laminator does the vast majority of the work there too. Like, it's not, as long as you're taking your time and lining things up. I actually just learned to use the laminator last week. Somebody finally was like, okay, show me how to use this machine. And I was like, oh, that's it? Okay. So it's just a matter of taking your time and slowing down and getting it right. But yeah, so it laminates basically any of our vehicle wraps get laminated. anything that's going to be outside for any major duration, it's going to get laminated. Those menu boards, I'm assuming they're going to 40 different restaurants around, some sort of chain restaurant, 40 different ones. So those all get laminated as well, just to kind of keep them looking clean. And they're going to be in a restaurant, and I guess that's the other thing that lamination does. It makes it so it's easier to clean. We're doing, those drills that do the fiber. We're wrapping some of those drills for a construction company, and they were like, "Can you just put some laminate on this side so it's easier to clean?" So that was something I kind of didn't really even think about until today. That, oh well, when you put laminate on it, it makes it easier for the customer to clean, and they're actually willing to pay an extra $800 to have the other side of the drill wrapped, even though nobody can see it. Just makes it easier for them to clean it. Yep. So.
All right. So what I'm gonna do is just stop for a second. If there's any questions, feel free to ask via the chat. And so I want to talk real quick, Michael. So now that everybody's comfortable or familiar with the equipment that you have, I want to talk through now, different projects that you've gotten, and then so talk to us about this project here, how you got it, the process, what equipment you used, and if you don't mind, maybe just share what this type of project would cost for a customer.
Yeah, I know, very familiar with this one. So this is part of the USA Baseball has a facility not too far from us, and I actually got this project from buying another sign shop. There was an independent sign shop nearby that happened to be a personal friend of mine, and he needed to get out, and so we bought him out, and this is one of his good customers. So this is the D2 tournament. So NCAA has a tournament every year, kind of the World Series of college baseball, and they play there. Now, the fun project on this one is they play all the qualifying games on Memorial Day weekend. And practice then starts for these guys on Thursday morning. So we all get in on Tuesday morning and have to get everything ready. And we didn't know these teams until that Tuesday morning when we showed up. I mean, technically we knew them on Sunday, but we didn't come in and work on Monday. So we get in on Tuesday morning, and we have to get everything printed with these team logos on it. And this is actually, it's a really big deal because most college players don't go professional into their sport, right? Most of them go professional into something else, whether it be doctors, lawyers, accountants, or something else. So most of the kids that show up to this tournament, this is their last, it's their last tournament. And they get to play in this really cool arena, or I guess a really cool field with stands and everything. And their goal, the city actually owns this area, but the city's goal is to make it just super special for them. And that way, when they show up, they get to see their team's logo on these on the windows. We actually do a giant map on the sidewalk it's the whole U.S., and we put the 8 teams that are on and show exactly where they came from. Those window graphics, maybe that was $800 to $1,000. Considering the design and installation and everything. That whole project for the town of Cary was north of $20,000. I want to say it was about $25,000 that we had to do in 2 days.
Wow.
But there was just a lot that went into it too. And now some of it we were able to do ahead of time. Some of it was evergreen, like the championship logo there in the middle. We knew what that one was. That one wasn't going to change. It was the team logos. So we were able to do some things ahead of time. We were able to wrap they wanted a trophy podium that was going to be wrapped with this year and show, the previous winners. And they also actually had us print, I think it was I think we printed one decal of each team because we weren't sure who was going to actually make it to the end. And so that way they had those going into the weekend. And when that team finally came and won the championship, they put the logo over top of the question mark and then awarded the trophy with, and the teams got to have their logo on everything the whole way through. And it just makes it feel really special for them. And like I said, the town of Cary appreciates it too.
I'll tell you, I actually, I played in college, and I was one of those kids that you just talked about. But just this little bit of seeing our logo and my name on certain things, it was a really special time of my life, and you experienced that. So that's really, really cool. All right, so I want to go through. Let's talk about this here, because this is kind of like outside of the core business of when you think of traditional large and wide format graphics, right? So talk to us about this job, because I think what people on this call need to understand is it's not just what the equipment can produce. and maybe your cutter can produce this, the lettering here, but you have a lot of different options of what you can sell. And so talk to us a little bit about this, Michael.
Yeah, no, this is what I these are this is it looks so boring, right? It's some black letters on a white on just a white sign. This is what I call my free money hacks. So this one never actually touched our studio. We have there's another sign shop, my network. Once again, I used to work, when I was in fabrication, I had good relationships with all my customers. I've kept up with them over the years. This one guy I know, Jesse, he went on to a sign shop, rather large sign operation. And, he was part of my due diligence to buying SpeedPro. Hey, what do you know about SpeedPro? What do you know about the sign business? How is it treating you? And so, he was able to share a lot of insight and say, if you end up transacting, let's set it up and let's make a deal. And that's another aspect is like, I don't feel like really anybody out here is a competitor. I have made friends with most of the other sign shops and print shops in the area because it turns out nobody has the exact same capabilities of each other. So we can actually help each other out a good amount. So anyways, the signs, these are acrylic letters. The address was already there. My landlord manages other buildings in the area. She sent me a message, hey, can you do these letters? I go, sure. I went out, measured it up, saw exactly what they needed, pulled the sign permit, saw the requirements that we had to meet, gave her a price. I think this one was about $1,500. I bought the acrylic letters from one company, and then I hired somebody else to install it. I think I paid couple $100 to the installer because I pieced together a few installs for him that day, and I think I paid about $500 for the lettering. So I think I spent maybe $700 to $800 on this one, and we billed about $1,500 on it. So like I said, I call it the free money hack because we didn't actually have to produce anything in the studio, and we still managed to put profit on the bottom line.
And that's great because you've got, in theory, right? You've got different businesses out there, kind of, like that. If you have business that you can make or make money off of that you're not producing. You can make money off installations. You can make money off people taking down signs and taking down graphics. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can make money. I really appreciate you putting this example up here because I think most people just think of, all right, well, a graphic means I'm putting something up on a like right here on a wall, right? And
Yeah.
so I want to make sure we got about 20 minutes left. In my mind, I think most people, when they think of graphics, are like, oh, this is what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. But Michael, you've showed us in all these different examples, it's not just graphics on a wall. It can be a lot of different, like this is a great example here of what you could probably produce just on your flatbed printer.
Yeah, that was a big one, and that was one that was nice because we had the 1000 and we can print up to 60 inches wide. They wanted these things to be 5 foot wide, and you can't necessarily tell that's 5 foot tall there. But it's a big piece, right? And it's a lot to handle, and a lot of places don't have that capability. It was nice that we did have the capability, but yeah, that was also that one station process for us, and we made a couple dozen of those, and it went inside this big manufacturing facility, and just looked great.
All right, so Michael, talk to us a little bit about generating leads. Generating leads. And how do the majority of your leads come in? Are they coming in through networking from you? Or are they coming in from referrals? Is it SpeedPro marketing? Talk to us a little bit about that.
A good amount come from people searching vehicle wraps near me. And then the other part, I'd say almost split, where it's half of it's just coming in from people searching for, sign shop near me, print shop near me, vehicle wraps near me. And then the other ones are me networking, getting out there and just being in the community, letting people know that we're not just, some faceless, chain. I'm actually the owner. I live 7 minutes from my studio. And going to the chamber events, I went to the first chamber event, didn't make a single sale. But I went to 9 chamber events, and guess what? We're now the preferred print vendor for town of Morrisville. We're doing their business cards. We don't even, we don't make business cards in-house, but somebody dropped the ball, and we had shown up enough times. They go, oh, I know this guy. He's always at the chamber events. Everybody seems to be happy with him. His Google reviews continue to climb. Let's give him a chance. And it was just one of those things. We just took it off their plate. All of a sudden, they don't have to worry about pamphlets. They don't have to worry about business cards, and it goes right back into the free money hack, I call it, because they're happy to pay our markup. They don't really care that it's where exactly it comes from, and that's something too. Like, everybody knows Walmart doesn't make anything, right? But they still go into Walmart, still go into Target and buy those things. And so I try to make sure that I'm doing the same thing. I'm offering that service, right? Like if you need business cards and you just don't want to mess with another vendor, then we will provide your business cards, even though we have to buy them from somebody else.
Got it. And talk to us a little bit about, and I want to keep going here, Michael. So the vehicle graphic part of your business, okay? Are you doing a lot of these wrapping within your studio? And do you have the ability to bring in vehicles? And how important is that to be able to bring vehicles into a controlled climate?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we have 2 bays. Picking up the second bay gave us more square footage, so we can actually fit up to 3 vehicles indoors right now. And yeah, you gotta have it in climate control. I mean, North Carolina here, that summer we had, I mean, oh my goodness, June, July, those were just brutal. Nobody wanted to be outside. I heard of people in the landscape world they lost entire crews, just people just not showing up for work because it was just so unbelievably hot. And then, obviously it gets cold in the winter, and stickers, no sticker likes to stick when it's cold. And, vehicle wraps are no different. They're giant stickers. And if you're trying to stick them in the cold, they're just not going to work well. You're going to have a potential for, something to come off completely. And, and nobody wants that. Everyone wants a good product that sticks on there. Because it's not only representing that brand like this Cocada, it's representing us as well. So you just have to be wrapping inside. There's on occasions we can get away with an outside wrap on like a giant vehicle, but I would say 95% of our vehicles get wrapped inside. And if we have to do something outside, like those drills I was talking about, because it's like a $10,000 permit to move that thing. We will wrap that on site, but the customers also know, hey, if it's too windy, too warm, too hot, too cold, we're going to have to reschedule. And, that's part of that's just some expectations management on the front end.
All right, I have 2 questions. First one is, let's talk a little bit about competition. And I loved the answer before, and how, most of your competition, they're your friends, they're a strategic partner. But talk to us about pricing and, with competition, and is that a thing that you've noticed so far being an owner for a year?
So I haven't met a whole lot of competition because I try to make sure that I'm targeting the people. One of my primary focuses is targeting people that we are a very low item on the balance sheet for. So I don't, if they're spent, I guess if their biggest spend is with sign shops or vehicle wrap shops, they might be a little more sensitive to it. But I found that for the most part, we're a low item. Like that crane shop, right? The crane rigging place, they're making, each crane, they're sending out 36 cranes every day. Each one's going to bring back anywhere from, $2,000 to $10,000 in revenue for them. $2,000 to get this thing decaled up real nice, and they know it's handled. They don't bat an eye. They just don't even bat an eye. They're not shopping it out. They say, we know this guy. He's going to show up on time. They're going to do a good job. They're going to stand behind their work. So I have found like the best that you could do to differentiate yourself is just make sure that you're standing behind your work and putting out really good product. And and some of that is on occasion, and that's where trying to get everyone to march to the beat of the same drum happened a couple of times, where people were like, oh well, we can easily just fix this. And I'm like, are we gonna be solving the problem by fixing it, or are we putting a band-aid on it, right? Are we patching it? And I had a guy that I even once told, reprint that. It's messed up, reprint it. And he ended up not reprinting it and trying to fix it. He ended up losing almost a whole day trying to do that fix, where we could have just reprinted it and known that we were going to deliver a great project. Given, yes, we're going to give up a little bit of margin, but we ended up giving up time, which is, in my opinion, more valuable. So my thing is, as long as you're producing a good product, people are going to keep coming back. If somebody wants to beat you up on price, I typically don't negotiate on price. I had a good sized project we bid, and they're like, yeah, we need all this. It was like an O2 Fitness, and they were like, we need all this done, and we need it done in 2 weeks. And I go, great, $35,000. And they came back 3 days later and said, somebody just quoted me $28,000. And I said, well, good for you. I will not negotiate on price. This is the price. It's $35,000, especially the tight turnaround that you wanted in. And so on like that one, they ended up going somewhere else. But also I found like the people that are beating you up on price are usually more difficult to work with in the long run anyways.
Sure, right.
So I almost I prefer to fire people with a price than not, and I've actually been also surprised on several occasions where I threw ridiculously high numbers at them because I didn't necessarily want the projects, and then ended up getting them anyways. And then I was super happy because they were very profitable jobs.
Sure. All right. Last question for me, Michael. eh, what advice would you give to people either on this call or eventually they're going to be listening in and watching this, and they're still in that discovery process? What advice would you give them in regards to moving forward? And I will say this. You know, Will Smith had a really good interview. This is before he slapped Chris Rock, but I think people watched it and promoted it more. But when he jumped out, he was talking about the first time he skydived, and he was talking about owning your own business and comparing it to that, where it's very scary, right? Before you jump out of that plane, and then once you do it, he's like, oh, it really wasn't that bad, right? And so and I feel like that's what a lot of folks, either on this call or they're going to hear it in the future, that's their biggest fear is they've never owned a business before. And you dealt with it, working with your wife's, father, um, and now you are in charge. You are the boss. So, but let's go back to what I asked. What advice would you give folks that are still in the discovery process, that are still looking to buy into SpeedPro?
I mean, if you're the type of person that gets things done, and then I think that you could absolutely be successful here. If going to a network event terrifies you, then it might not necessarily be the right fit. But I definitely think like those that are that understand business, understand the relationship is more important than anything. Those are the ones that are going to do well in this, and because everything is a relationship. That you have relationship with your employees, you have relationships with your clients, you have relationships with your vendors, and I think that's the biggest thing to focus on, not necessarily the unknown, because something's always going to go wrong. There's always going to be unknowns, and but the ones that I feel like I'm an action guy. I'm just one that's going to get up and do things every single day. I could, if I hit that $1 billion lottery, I would still have to do something the next day. I couldn't just sit on the beach for the rest of my life, So I think it definitely is going to be somewhat personality driven. But if you're at that point where you're like, this is, if the only holdup is the unknown, then maybe it's not the right fit for you. But like if you're terrified of that unknown, then it might not. But if that's the only thing, is like I'm just not sure if what comes next, then I say do it, right? Because like this is a fantastic network. There's always going to be unknowns. If you can go get a job at you can go to a job in corporate, get a W-2, and you're still going to have unknowns there, right? There's layoffs, there's downsizing. Even those companies can go out of business. So, for me, I looked at it as less risky to be in business for myself than working at a large corporation.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much. And again, anybody on this call, if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with me afterwards, and I'll help you get those questions answered. But Michael, thank you very much. I'm going to send you, Kate, if you're on and listening, send Michael the recording after it's all done. And but I really appreciate it, Michael. Great job. I'll speak for everybody on this call. It's very insightful learning your story, and hopefully we can do this next year at this time. And I'd love to hear the story. I mean, it's to be continued right now, but what you're doing, and I see your sales every month, it's pretty impressive. And we're very excited to have you as a SpeedPro franchisee. And will I see you in October in Orlando at our convention?
That is the plan. I've got a room
right.
and a plane booked, so barring any unforeseen changes, I'll be there.
All right, man. Well, Michael, thank you very much again. And thank you, everybody, for your participation, either right now or in the future. And I look forward to working